Hello everyone, Brendan McCauley here with the Theology of the Body Institute. In today's video, I want to share with you a little bit about one of my favorite movies. Despite the vulgarity and foul language in it, has a lot of that. Good Will Hunting. And I want to talk about how Good Will Hunting unmasks the truth behind all 20-year-olds. If you're new to this channel, I first want to invite you to like and subscribe. That way you'll be up to date with all the new videos we'll be posting here soon. This channel is all about journeying together into the truths of our humanity and what we're really made for. So I want to invite you to subscribe. So, Good Will Hunting. Well, a little bit about the film. There's two main actors, Robin Williams and Matt Damon, who play, Robin Williams plays Sean. He's a part-time counselor and therapist, and he's a brilliant and wise man. And then there's Will Hunting. He's 20 years old, arrogant, he's got a big ego, he has a photographic memory, literally, and his best friend says in a Boston accent, "My boy's wicked smart." He is wicked smart, but he doesn't really care about things and is kind of pop-off-ish. So Will Hunting gets in trouble and has to go to some counseling sessions, and he's with Sean. And Will's in there for the first time and he lights up his cigarette because he doesn't really care much. And he doesn't want to be in the counseling session, so he starts to try to make fun of Sean and tear him apart verbally. And he goes over to one of his paintings and starts looking at it and is like, "Gosh, you must be in a storm right now." And he's like, "What, did your wife leave you for another man?" And then Sean gets up out of his chair and grabs him by the throat and says, "If you ever say anything about my wife again, I will end you." And that was the end of that counseling session. But Sean wanted to continue journeying with Will. And they meet the next day. And this is actually one of the most famous movie scenes. Will and Sean are sitting on a bench overlooking this pond on a fall day. And Sean says to Will, "You know, I thought about what you said to me the other day about my painting. I stayed up half the night thinking about it. But then," Sean said, "something occurred to me and I fell into a nice, deep, peaceful sleep and I haven't thought about you since." He's like, "Know what occurred to me? You're just a kid. You don't have the faintest idea of what you're talking about." I think I need to hear that. I think most young 20-year-olds need to hear this, that sometimes our grandparents and our parents know a little bit more about life than we do. Even though maybe our studies are more advanced, the reality of suffering, life, death, our parents and grandparents know a lot more about that. So they're sitting on this bench and Sean asks Will a question. "You know, if I asked you about art, you'd probably just give me the skinny of every art book ever written. Michelangelo, you know a lot about him, don't you? Life's work, political aspirations, sexual orientation." But he said to Will, "I bet you couldn't tell me what it smells like to be in the Sistine Chapel, to look up at that beautiful ceiling." He's like, "You know, Will, you're a tough kid. If I asked you about war, you'd probably throw Shakespeare at me." But he's like, "But you've never been near one. You've never held your best friend in your lap, watching him gasp his last breath, looking for you for help." And then he says to him, "If I asked you about love, you'd quote me a sonnet. But you've never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable, known someone who could level you with her eyes, feeling like God put an angel on earth just for you." He goes on to say, "You wouldn't know what it's like to be her angel, to have that love for her be there forever, through anything, through cancer. And you wouldn't know what it's like sitting up in a hospital room for 2 months holding her hands because the doctors can see in your eyes that the terms visiting hours don't apply to you." And then he says, "You do not know about real loss because that can only occur when you love something more than you love yourself." Doubt you've ever dared to love anybody that much. In this moment, Will Hunting was in silence. He was speechless. He was shocked. Because truth pierced him, and he knew it. He knew it. And so, it was funny, Sean, the last thing of the scene, Sean looks over to Will and says, "It's your move, Chief." Basically saying, "All right, take this in, come back to me when you have processed all this." And Will begins to trust Sean because he recognizes how real and authentic Sean is. And later on, towards the end of the film, we learn a lot about Will Hunting, why he kind of was pop-offish and really arrogant, have walls on his heart. One day, Sean receives papers about Will's upbringing. He didn't have parents. He lived in a foster care home, and his foster father beat him with a wrench. And these papers showed all these bruises on his body. And Sean was beginning to recognize where all of his pain, his attitude has come from. And Sean, being so loving and wise, went over to Will and he says, you know, Will, all of these things, it's not your fault. And Will's like, yeah, I know it's not my fault. He's like, son, look at me. It's not your fault. He's like, yeah, I know. And he said it a third time. It's not your fault. And Will started to break down a little bit and he shoved Sean. He said, don't mess with me. Not you. Don't mess with me. And he looked at him again and he said, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And he just broke down weeping and he hugged Sean and he was weeping because the walls on his heart finally were broken down and someone loved him there. That's where we can begin our healing process. Why does this movie scene unmask the truth behind all 20-year-olds? Because I think a lot of us live on the surface. We try to impress others. We look for our identity in other people, and we live from the surface. We have a lot of walls on our heart. We don't let a lot of people in. C.S. Lewis would say this. He says, I think the Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We're half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. C.S. Lewis goes on to say, we're like children playing around in a mud slum because we don't know what it's like to be at a holiday at sea. We're far too easily pleased. I think this is what's happening on college campuses. Most people in life we're half-hearted creatures. We live on the surface. And Good Will Hunting is a movie that unmasks all of that. It's an invitation to see differently, to hear differently, to live life in a more full and authentic way. So I just want to invite you to maybe look at your own heart. Where may you be hiding and living on the surface? Where may you need deeper healing and begin to start opening that up? I want to invite you to ponder those questions. So if you've enjoyed this video, I want to invite you to share it with any family or friends, and again, to subscribe to this channel so we can continue journeying to the truths of our humanity and what we're really made for. Anyways, I hope to see you soon. God bless.